welcome to my guide for the West Highland Way. This is actually a companion video, so if you haven't seen the full video of my hike, I'll link that down below. But if you have seen that, this is just me running through the route and give you some tips on how you can take on this challenge. So, first things first, I would recommend doing the 5-day itinerary. Now this is the minimum number of days that they recommend on the official website, but I think that that's a good pace for someone who's got some hiking experience, wants to take on a bit of a challenge, but also doesn't want to get too bored sort of hanging around at different places. I've got the AllTrails map up right here, and we'll just go through the route and yeah, we'll see how we get on. So first things first, getting to the trailhead itself. It's pretty simple. Milngavie is just a short train ride away from Glasgow, just down here. I had no problems, regular trains. I'd recommend going the public transport route. The first day is recommended to go from Milngavie to Balmaha, and that's about 20 miles. To start off with, the first few miles, it's just getting out of sort of the outskirts of Milngavie. It's going to be quite busy, lots of people sort of walking their dogs, all that kind of stuff. But pretty quickly it drops off into a nice, pleasant countryside path. Nothing too wild here. Path is pretty basic. There's refreshments along the way if you want to fill up. This 20 miles really is just getting things started and breaking into it. So yeah, as you can see, it's relatively flat, just a standard path that goes all the way through. After you go through Gateside and Drymen, just down here, it starts to get a bit more exciting. You'll get your first taste of the Scottish Highlands, and with it comes the first ascent. One of the two bigger ascents on the entire hike, called Conic Hill. At the top here you get really lovely views over Loch Lomond. Sort of Balmaha is a popular place to stay. It's got shops and many campsites. You'll find everything that you need. Day 2, heading up the east side of Loch Lomond. Here it gets pretty technical, I would say. This is probably one of the more challenging parts of the walk in terms of terrain. The first half of the path up the east side of Loch Lomond is really nice. It's very popular with tourists. You'll see many people around. The second half is where it gets much more challenging. The path goes right through the forest. There's many steps and things in the way to slow your progress. It can be a little bit frustrating. This I found to be the most frustrating part of the hike. Going is pretty slow at this point, and it's really just a case of sort of knuckling down and getting through it. There are two different options. So one runs alongside the lake, and there's a higher path which has some much easier terrain and will be much quicker to do. Now the official route goes down by the loch, so that's the one that I did, but I did see a lot of people who opted to go up and take the higher route, the easier route. If you're in a hurry or you want to get through this day a little bit easier, that might be the better option for you. Night 2 I'd recommend to spend at Inverarnan. Again, lots of different places to stay. I opted to wild camp down near the loch. If you are wild camping, just a point of caution on this one, Loch Lomond is a restricted area for wild camping. There are designated spots to camp. You do have to book them in advance. I had a look, all of those spots were fully booked out. So I just had a careful look at the map and managed to find a space that wasn't included in the restricted area, and I camped there. But yeah, definitely something to be wary of if, you know, after a long day you don't want to be trekking to try and get out of one of these areas just so you can set up camp. Day 3, you start at Inverarnan and you head up to the Bridge of Orchy. Now, although this is probably the easiest day of the 5, it does start heading up from Loch Lomond again with that difficult terrain before eventually levelling out and having a really nice end to the Bridge of Orchy. You can see on the map here it follows the A82 very closely. In fact, much of this hike does. You'll never be too far away from the road, and that's one of the most disappointing things that I found during this whole experience is, you know, I wanted to be out in the wilderness, but you're never too far away from the cars and the hustle and bustle of what is essentially a major road that runs right alongside this path. The Bridge of Orchy is really lovely. It's probably a much bigger town than most of the other ones. It's got everything you need. It's got multiple campsites. Yeah, the Bridge of Orchy is lovely, and it's a great sort of base for the final push, which is going to be the most challenging part of the hike, the final 2 days. And I recommend sort of setting up camp, getting there earlier in the day and really sort of relaxing and enjoying yourself. From the Bridge of Orchy, you set off to Kinlochleven, and this is going to be a big day. So first of all, you'll pass through all of the Glencoe's mountain range. These are the best views. This is probably why you came on this hike. It's absolutely stunning. This was the day that I enjoyed by far the most. There's some really nice picture spots to be had. You'll start the day off sort of heading over a moorland patch. The most challenging thing about this was that there's limited places to stop in the shade, and also there's nowhere to fill up your water or to get any additional food. So make sure you're fully stocked. The good news is that once you make it to King's House, there are some great public facilities, including a wild camping ground. Here would be a great place to spend a night if you're a bit tired from the trek that you've just done. I spent quite a long time hanging around this location, simply taking some photos and getting some video shots, but as well just relaxing in the shade and filling up my water bottle. The one downside is that although the views are amazing, there is still that main road that runs all the way through, and so you will be listening to the din of traffic for most of your time hiking through here. Here you'll have sort of the second biggest descent of the entire walk. I found this one the most challenging for sure. It's nicknamed the Devil's Staircase. Easy to see why. It really is a pain in the ass. But after you get up that, it's just a big, long, slow descent into Kinlochleven. This is definitely the most challenging day, day 4. The biggest thing that I had to contend with was the heat. There was a heat wave whilst I was there, and so it was 30 plus degrees every day. In Kinlochleven, lots of different places to stay. I actually did manage to book a campsite in Kinlochleven, but in the end I didn't end up staying there. I pushed on sort of a little bit ahead just so that I could make sure that I got to Fort William early enough to get my train home. Coming out of Kinlochleven, there's sort of a slow ascent and then really just walking through the foothills of Ben Nevis. It's really lovely. Again, great scenery all the way through. I really enjoyed this. It's a much shorter day. If you're following the 5-day itinerary, it's about 15 miles and you'll really enjoy this one. It's just a long sort of slow path into Fort William, and the last couple of miles are unfortunately through the Fort William town centre until you reach the finish line. So that's the itinerary. I'd really recommend doing it in the 5 days. I think that would be nice. Personally, I was in a little bit of a rush when I first got there, so I really pushed on and did it in about 3.5. I really found myself hurrying at some points and not enjoying it as much as I could have. Okay, so there's just a couple more things that I want to talk about, not particularly to do with the route. The first one is it does get very busy. This is a very popular hike. I did it in the height of summer, probably when it was at its busiest. I decided that I wanted to do this hike around 2 weeks before I actually went on it, and I found that all of the campsites were fully booked in every single place I wanted to stay. Wild camping is legal in Scotland, apart from in certain areas, especially around the east coast of Loch Lomond. So I'd really recommend, if you can, booking this further in advance. I would probably have enjoyed it a little bit more if I had sort of set places to stay where I could relax, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, book in advance as far as possible. The path itself and the terrain, it's generally pretty easy. I have heard some people say that they would wear running shoes instead of sort of hiking boots. I ended up wearing trail running shoes and I thought that was the perfect thing to wear. I would be able to get away with running shoes apart from that one section before Inverarnan along the east coast of Loch Lomond, which is really technical. So for that reason, I would recommend getting some decent footwear. The main challenge on this walk is just the distance. I saw a lot of people who'd come down with really bad blisters or twisted ankles or hiker's rash, etc. The days that I did it, it was also really hot. There was a heat wave going through Scotland. Can you believe it? So it was about 30 degrees. People were really suffering just from the distance and the heat. If you are halfway through the walk and you find yourself suffering with something like this, I would note that there's a bus route that effectively follows the entire of the hike. So at any point, if you are feeling like you can't carry on, you do have that option. In terms of specialist equipment to take, I took with me a water filter that I could fill up from freshwater sources. I think this is essential for this hike. I saved myself so much pain, especially with the heat. I essentially could just stop at any river that looked clean enough, fill up my water bottle, and I had fresh drinking water along the route. Once you get onto the moorland, that kind of starts to dry up. There's not too many opportunities for you to get some food, etc. So make sure you stock up when you're at places like the Bridge of Orchy or Kinlochleven, where they've got many different shops. Finally, I just wanted to give a note to any photographers who are thinking about doing this walk. For me, I thought that I would be able to walk through sort of some unspoiled Scottish Highlands and get some shots that other people wouldn't be able to get simply by putting in more effort than anyone and going the extra mile. That really wasn't the case because, like I mentioned, the road just goes along the side. There's a parking spot near sort of every viewpoint or every natural bit of scenery that looks nice. The other thing to mention is if you are spending the night at campsites or designated places to stay throughout the route and you wanted to hire a luggage service, that's definitely possible. There's a range of different options, and what they'll do is they'll pick up your luggage every morning from wherever you're staying and drop it to where you're staying the next day. You never have to carry a heavy backpack with you along the route. This seemed to be like a really popular option that a lot of people went for. The problem that you've got with something like this is that because you're in Scotland, you never want to go anywhere without sort of a solid raincoat or at least some kind of insulation. You never know what the weather can do. So obviously I packed those things as well as some trousers, and then it turned out that there was going to be a heat wave for the entire walk. So it's sort of sweltering weather, and I had to carry all that stuff with me even though I never used it at any point. Just make sure you're well prepared, really. The elements change all the time. You never really know what's going to happen. The weather forecast I found wasn't that reliable. It would say sort of rain was coming, but then the rain kept getting pushed back each day, so it never actually ended up raining throughout the entire hike for me. Another thing to note is the insects are terrible. There's so many midges, horseflies, just a range of different things that are going to try their hardest to bite you and make you as uncomfortable as possible. I took some spray with me that I just got off Amazon. Realistically, it did help, but it wasn't the best. I would highly recommend getting the strongest possible bug spray that you can for this hike, especially if you're doing it in the summer months. It is really unpleasant. I was having to sort of never really sit that still. Even when I stopped for a break to take my backpack off, I'd find myself just walking around to try and get away from them. It's particularly bad when you go over some of the moors. It's just relentless every time you stop. The other thing to make sure of is your tent. Make sure that it's got some kind of bug netting, and if it doesn't, purchase some so that you won't get bitten during the night. Finally, I'd have to say the absolute best thing about this walk is just the overall package experience. You'll see lots of places catering specifically to the West Highland Way. You'll meet many people who are doing the exact same route, and you'll get chatting to them. And overall, it's just a brilliant way to meet new people, get out into the countryside, and see some of the best sights of Scotland. I hope this guide was useful for anyone who was watching. If you do have any more questions that I didn't manage to answer within the video, ask me down in the comments section. I'll try my best to get back to you. And as always, if you can like the video and subscribe, it really helps me produce some more content. Thank you very much.